Where am I? What's happening? I'm trapped in a storm? How did I get here? And where is here?
Life is Strange is an episodic choice-based adventure game that has become one of the most well-known games of its genre, next to the ranks of the Telltale games like The Walking Dead, The Wolf Among Us, and many others. I remember first buying this game in 2017 on the PS3, as the game was discounted at $5. After playing through it, I feel it was a game that kept me interested with the setting of Arcadia Bay, the relationship between the two protagonists, Max Caulfield and Chloe Price, and how the narrative is structured, revolving the disappearance of Rachel Amber and Max's newly discovered power to rewind time at will. Over the years, the game has expanded into a franchise with the release of the 2017 spin-off title, Life is Strange Before the Storm, a follow-up focused on two brothers on the run with 2018's Life is Strange 2, and a standalone title / demo of Life is Strange 2 released before the game's reveal, The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit. Today we are diving into each of the games in the Life is Strange series to see how they hold up, and see how the games have evolved with each entry. So get ready for some drama, mystery, twists, and a bit of teenage angst and dated dialogue. This is 2015's Life is Strange. Dontnod Entertainment, the French development team behind Life is Strange. At the time, they were only known for their first game in 2013 on PS3 and Xbox 360 titled Remember Me. Remember? I don't remember this game, nor did anybody else. Though the game did okay sales-wise, the game had a lukewarm reception from critics for the game's narrative and mechanics, though it stumbled quite a bit with combat, some parts of the storyline, and the game structure. And despite the game selling 1 million copies, it wasn't enough to save Dontnod from filing bankruptcy at the time. However, Dontnod was still able to try to develop a new title in 2013, with the game later being picked up by Square Enix as the game's publisher. Because of financial reasons, along with creative and marketing purposes, the game was designed in an episodic format, which was a pretty common format at the time, as previously mentioned with Telltale games. The game's first episode, Chrysalis, was released on January 30th, 2015 on PS3, Xbox 360, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, with a mobile port of the game coming out on iOS and Android a few years later. The game's episodes were released throughout most of the year, with the 5th episode, Polarized, released on October 20th, with the game taking 9 months for all the episodes to be released, with each episode lasting 2 to 3 months in between one another. The game starts with Max Caulfield waking up in a stormy field, very close to a lighthouse. Upon approaching the lighthouse, she ends up seeing a horrific view of a massive tornado. Just as the lighthouse gets struck and collapses, Max wakes up from a nightmare in her photography classroom, being taught by a well-renowned photographer, Mark Jefferson. You can choose to read Max's journal, which will give you the background of Max's character. Max is a photographer who ends up being accepted into the photography program at Blackwell Academy, resulting in Max moving from Seattle back to her childhood town of Arcadia Bay, Oregon. Max struggles with having to turn in a photo for the Everyday Heroes photo contest, given she's having doubts about the overall presentation of the image. After a brief conversation with Jefferson, Max heads to the restroom to calm herself down, where she ends up seeing a butterfly, and she takes the opportunity to take a photo of it behind the bathroom stall. Entering the restroom is Nathan Prescott, son of a rich family that owns most of Arcadia Bay, as well as providing the funding of Blackwell Academy. Also entering is a punk chick who asks Nathan about drugs. Upon insulting him, results in Nathan pulling a gun on her.
I can tell everybody Nathan Prescott is a punk ass who begs like a little girl and talks to himself.
You don't know who the fuck I am or who you're messing around with.
Where'd you get that? What are you doing? Come on, put that thing down!
Don't ever tell me what to do. I'm so sick of people trying to control me!
You are going to get in hella more trouble for this than drugs.
Nobody would ever even miss your punk ass, would they?
Get that gun away from me, psycho!
No!
Upon Max reacting to the shooting, she ends up discovering that she has the ability to rewind time at will. After replaying the classroom segment again, Max enters the restroom and retraces her steps. She manages to pull the fire alarm just in time, which allows the punk chick to fight back and get away. Later on, when Max retrieves a flash drive for her friend Warren, she's confronted by Nathan, in which she is saved by the punk chick, who turns out to be Chloe Price, Max's childhood friend who has changed significantly ever since Max moved away. Upon reconnecting with one another, and Chloe learning about Max's power, the two would end up getting into the mysteries of Arcadia Bay regarding the disappearance of Chloe's friend Rachel Amber, and the weird circumstances around the town that may be connected to Max's power. Playing through this game, I thought the story did a good job keeping me interested with each episode. Episode 1, Chrysalis, is able to establish the world and its characters. Other major characters in this game include David Madsen, a very stern war veteran who works as a security guard for Blackwell Academy, and is also Chloe's stepfather, though the two do not have a good relationship as Chloe always refers to him as step-douche. There is also Kate Marsh, another student who Max is friends with, who is constantly being bullied, especially by Victoria Chase, a rich girl who fills in the mean girl stereotype of the game's setting. Episodes 2 and 3, Out of Time and Chaos Theory, focuses more on fleshing out the relationship between Max and Chloe, as well as introducing other important characters such as Joyce, Chloe's mother who works at the Two Whales Diner, and Frank Bowers, a drug dealer who's been confronting Chloe regarding a debt for weed. As for episodes 4 and 5, Darkroom and Polarized, they mainly focus on the build-up and reveal of Rachel Amber's disappearance and the strange occurrences that happen, such as the snow in episode 1, a solar eclipse in episode 2, and a random occurrence of dead whales on the shore and dead birds in episode 4. My favorite aspect of the story is mainly the relationship between Max and Chloe. You really get the sense that they are childhood friends, from their interactions to even the performances of Hannah Tell and Ashley Burch as Max and Chloe respectively. Max would focus on doing the right thing, while Chloe is more of a rebel who has her own ideas of solving issues, even if they are morally wrong, which will be mentioned later. When it comes to the presentation, the game's visuals are actually pretty good. The game runs on the third iteration of the Unreal Engine, with the game taking a very interesting art style. It is said during the game's development that the game's textures were all hand-painted, which in execution creates an interesting art style with the game's environments. In a standstill, the locations look like something out of a painting, which is pretty cool. Though I imagine with Unreal Engine 3 and the more simple visuals, this is how the game was able to run on PS3 and Xbox 360. I do remember times in the PS3 version where some of the textures were very blurry and of lower quality compared to the PS4 version, along with having much more frequent loading times on PS3 when transitioning to different levels, whereas the PS4 version has 2 loading screens for the start of the episode and the credits, while the levels load up almost instantaneously. The visuals on the mobile port are a bit different with the lighting and detail, as the port runs on Unreal Engine 4 instead. Whether you think the game looks better on consoles or mobile is up to you. The conversations can be well animated at times, though there are a few technical issues here and there, such as in this scene of episode 5 where during a final conversation with Warren, Max just stops talking while her dialogue plays.
Max, going back in time is what caused the storm.
All because of me? How?
The voice acting is pretty good for the most part, though given the college setting, there are times where the dialogue can feel a bit dated at times.
Now you're totally stuck in the retro zone. Sad face.
Right. You look like the cover of hipstergirl.com.
At least you're still a smartass.
That drive-in is having a 70s Planet of the Apes marathon. Let's go ape!
I'm not sure why you're letting me decide your fate, but go Tassium.
Wrong. You got hella cash. You are going to get in hella more trouble. Okay, Max. I'm hella ready. Hella yes!
You're right. We hella deserve it. Splish splash.
Did you actually just say hella? I think I'm a good bad influence on you.
Yeah, this dialogue can be hella bad at times. Yes, I said hella, as Chloe says it a lot in this game. Even the developers were aware of that, as the text size and the subtitles options are arranged as normal, large, and hella large. Oh, this game is such a product of its time.
Hella? I hate that word, no offense.
And then there's the music. Life is Strange consists of a mix of licensed music produced by Sid Matters, Jose Gonzalez, Sparkle Horse, Bright Eyes, and others, along with an original score done by Sid Matters' founder and frontman, Jonathan Morali. The inclusion of licensed music was pretty good, especially when used in the context of cutscenes in the game, from Bright Eyes' Lua playing in Chloe's room after Max and Chloe break into Blackwell, to Message to Bear's Mountains playing during a pivotal scene in the game, and especially Foal's Spanish Sahara playing during one of the game's endings. Meanwhile, Morali does a good job creating original music for the game, creating some pretty memorable tracks from the title screen music Golden Hour, to the credits theme Max and Chloe, with the latter personally being my favorite track of the game. As for the gameplay, you simply just move Max around with the left analog stick, along with holding the right trigger to move faster. As you explore the environment, characters and objects will be highlighted. Choosing to look at them will let you hear Max's thoughts on that person or object in question. You can also choose to interact with other characters, where you watch a conversation and you choose a dialogue choice for Max to say. That pretty much describes the basic gameplay of this game. But then there's the main gameplay mechanic that makes Life is Strange stand out from the other choice-based games, the rewind mechanic. After rewinding back to Mr. Jefferson's classroom at the beginning of episode 1, Max will now have the ability to rewind time at will, which is done by holding the left trigger. There are a couple of ways you can use the rewind mechanic to your advantage. You can see where a conversation goes, and if you learn an important piece of info from that person you're talking to, you can go back and redo the conversation, except this time use the new info you learned to engage in a new talking point. You could also rewind to prevent minor events from happening. Take Alyssa, for example, a purple-haired student who throughout the game always ends up in an incident that would result in her either getting hit by a thrown object or getting soaked by a vehicle driving through a puddle of water on the road. And in such cases, you can choose to rewind time to warn her before these events occur. And in episode 1, you can also rewind time to fix any mistakes, such as if you broke Chloe's snow globe, or when exploring the garage and digging into David's files. And there will be times where you'll have to memorize what events will happen, and then rewind time to predict them, such as when proving to Chloe you could rewind time by predicting what items she has in her pockets, and predicting the events within the diner.
You predicted a cockroach on the jukebox? I pledge allegiance to Max and the power for which she stands.
The most important aspect of using your power is during major choices. Throughout each episode, you're given a major choice that you'll have to think about and choose what action you want to do at that moment in time. You'll see the results in the short term, but the choices you make will have consequences later in the game. One good example is in episode 2, which is when you first encounter Frank. When Frank pulls a knife on Chloe, Max will point David's gun at Frank, and you're given a choice of whether or not to shoot him. If you choose not to shoot him, he will end up taking the gun for himself, which will definitely come back later in episode 4. If you feel like you made the wrong choice, you can rewind back to before this incident occurs and choose the alternative choice to shoot Frank, the outcome of which being that there are no bullets left in the gun after all. But Frank will remember you for having the guts to shoot him, and he'll leave without taking the gun. As the game progresses, there are more of these choices that you'll have to think about, though regardless of which choice you make, the game's story will continue as normal, just that it'll take your choices into account later in the game. The only thing about the game is that there isn't really a failure screen in this game. There are times where the game will just freeze in time if you screw up on a certain moment, such as if an obstacle is about to crush Max, or if you shoot the car bumper when shooting balls with Chloe, which will end up with the following.
Jesus, I shot myself! Ugh, I shot myself! Back up, back up!
Gun?
When it freezes, all you do is simply rewind to fix your mistake. It also occurs when you're sneaking into the academy's swimming pool and you have to sneak through guards to escape. You get caught, just rewind. It's not like in Telltale's The Walking Dead, where one screw-up is going to result in Lee becoming food for the walkers or getting shot in the face. There really is no sense of challenge in this game, so if you just want to focus on the story, then go for it. In terms of other aspects to mention, there is the previously brought up journal, which keeps track of information on the characters from Max's perspective, along with a diary that summarizes Max's past as well as the events within the game. The final page of the diary will have a yellow sticky note that will list your objective, which can be very useful if you need to be reminded of what to do next. The last thing to mention is that there are optional photos you can take that serves as the game's collectibles. Sometimes you'll find them just there in the area, while others you'll have to trigger certain events in order to take the photos. If you replay the game's episodes, you can go to any area in the game, with the level select highlighting all the areas these collectibles are at, and you can load them up in collectible mode, where revisiting these areas will only save the collectibles you find. You can also choose to restart the game from any area, whether to backtrack your save file or to restart on a separate save file. The only purpose of getting these photos is just to unlock trophies on PlayStation or achievements on Xbox and PC. These collectibles, along with just finishing the episodes themselves, makes Life is Strange one of the easiest games to get all the achievements for. So, if you're into getting the max gamer score on Xbox or to get the platinum trophy on PlayStation, then give this game a shot. The following video will contain spoilers for Life is Strange. If you're interested in playing this game, it's best not to watch this video. For those who are still here, on with the show. To wrap things up, let's talk about the rest of the story and how it ends. Throughout the game, a lot of events occur that would lead to what's building up by the end of the game. In episode 2, Kate Marsh has been getting bullied by the students of Blackwell because of a video of her being drunk at a Vortex Club party, which was hosted by Nathan Prescott. By the end of the episode, Kate will jump off of the dormitory building, which results in Max trying to use her power to rewind time. After a couple of attempts, Max uses the furthest extent of her power to halt time itself, where she is able to get to the top of the roof before Kate makes the jump. At this point, Max loses her ability to rewind time, which means now the player has to carefully choose what to say to convince Kate not to jump. This is my favorite part of the game, because the game takes away your ability to rewind time, and now you have to remember what you've learned about Kate and everything you did prior to this point. Whether it's by examining her dorm room earlier in the episode, or by answering her phone call in that same episode, or when you back her up when she was confronted by David early on. All of these choices will impact the options you have to try to convince her not to take her life, and if you screw up once, she'll jump and she'll be dead for the rest of the game. If you did otherwise, then she will be alive and you'll be able to see her again in a later episode. Because of this incident, and upon learning from Kate that Nathan may have drugged her during the Vortex Club party, this is what leads to Max and Chloe investigating what happened to Rachel Amber. Throughout the first 3 episodes, you learn more about Chloe's past as you end up learning that her father, William, died in a car accident, and around that same time is when Max ended up moving to Seattle. This led to Chloe having more of a rebel personality, especially when Joyce gets married to David. You also learn that Chloe was very close to Rachel Amber, as she more or less took Max's place of being Chloe's best friend during Max's absence. After a falling out after Max and Chloe learn about Rachel's relationship with Frank, Max ends up discovering a new aspect to her power, which is being able to go back in time through a photograph. Going back to the day William could have died in the car accident, Max ends up changing the past by hiding William's keys that prevent him from taking his car. This results in Max changing the past, as when she gets back to the present, Max is now part of the Vortex Club, William is alive, and unfortunately Chloe herself ends up with her whole body paralyzed. This was caused after she got a car for her 16th birthday and got involved in a similar car accident. Throughout the beginning of episode 4, Max learns that Chloe's health is deteriorating, and her parents are now in massive debt due to her medical bills. Upon thinking about using the same photo to go back and reverse her decision, Chloe would end up asking Max to kill her since she knows of her parents' death and that she's dying. Whether you choose to do so or not, Max will end up reversing her decision and head back to her original timeline. Upon returning, Max and Chloe will end up having to go talk to Frank about any info regarding Rachel, which will end in either convincing Frank to give the two his book about his drug deals, or it ends with Chloe killing Frank and his dog in self-defense. After narrowing down the evidence, Max and Chloe track everything down to an old barn, where underground is the dark room, a room filled with expensive camera equipment, setup, and an archive of photos of girls in disturbing poses. which gives off the idea that Nathan is drugging the students to use as subjects for these messed up photos. Upon finding out that Rachel is among the students and a photo set in the junkyard, the pieces have come together as it is revealed that Rachel has been dead this entire time, which leads to a very emotional moment. After attending the Vortex Club party to find Nathan and leave, Max and Chloe head back to the junkyard to confront Nathan. However, Max is drugged and Chloe is shot and killed by none other than Mr. Jefferson. So it turns out that Mark Jefferson was the main villain all along, as he manipulated Nathan to having the darkroom set up so that Jefferson can have subjects for his twisted photography. It is also revealed that Jefferson killed Nathan off-screen because of his unstable mental health, especially because Nathan tried to replicate Jefferson's actions to impress him by doing the same to Rachel Amber, but that resulted in Nathan killing Rachel via an overdose. The rest of episode 5 revolves around Max using time travel to change current events, from changing aspects of the darkroom to gain the photos necessary to do this method, to tipping off David about Jefferson's actions at the start of the game, to Max winning the Everyday Heroes contest and having her photo displayed in a museum, to the point where Max ends up back in the darkroom, except now she has to distract Jefferson long enough for David to put an end to this. By the way, this part was a bit of a pain because I kept getting David killed or knocked out every single time and had to rewind to remember what I did wrong. David would end up getting the upper hand and knocks Jefferson out, allowing him to be able to free Max. Upon afterwards, Max takes Jefferson's car and heads back to the Two Whales Diner, except this time all the strange occurrences have resulted in the tornado becoming a reality. Max arrives at the diner where she uses a photo she took with Warren in episode 4 to prevent Chloe's death by time traveling back to convince Chloe not to search for Nathan and tell her everything of what's happened in the future. This results in Max and Chloe now being close to the lighthouse during the tornado, in which Max ends up passing out and ends up in this strange as hell fever dream that I think I'm just gonna let the footage speak for itself.
And that means I'll always be alone. Thanks to you.
Kate, that's not true. I've always been your friend.
Don't try to hide, Max! Get over here! Let me capture you!
Hey, babe. Who wants to go
Miss
ape?
Price can't just
Go
show up
ape,
at Blackwell
go
in a
ape,
wheelchair and
baby.
think we're going to accommodate her every whim.
I was happy just
Now
being
I'll
your
die
friend.
alone.
Honey,
Why do you
I
want all
always
your
thought
friends
of
to
you like
die?
a daughter. And now you're gonna take me away.
So this
from
is
my
how Max
family.
gets her revenge on.
Why would
Killing
you
me
do
is
that?
Breaker.
not
Thanks for
cool.
saving.
You were just looking for a shortcut because you can't make friends on your own. That's not true. I have great friends, and I've used my powers for good. Please, stop playing innocent. You're a goddamn hypocrite. You've left a trail of death and suffering behind you.
Upon waking back up, Max realizes that all these strange occurrences and the tornado were caused by the result of Max changing fate by saving Chloe's life at the start of the game. When Chloe gives Max the photo of the butterfly she took at the restroom, you're given the final choice of either to sacrifice Chloe or to sacrifice Arcadia Bay. Choosing the former will result in Max saying goodbye to Chloe and time travel back in time to let Chloe's death play out, which results in Nathan getting arrested and confessing to everything, and also leads to Jefferson's arrest. Max is now in a new timeline where Chloe has died, but the tornado is gone as Max has let the events play out as intended, with the game ending at Chloe's funeral. Choosing the latter will result in Max tearing up the photo and letting the tornado destroy Arcadia Bay, killing everyone in the process. The game ends with the aftermath of the tornado. Seeing all the destroyed buildings and the implications that everyone is dead, Max and Chloe drive off to New Horizons. To this day, there isn't really a canonical ending with Life is Strange, as throughout the series, it seems that the developers have made the ending open to where either one could be canon, as evident in Life is Strange 2, where if you start a new save file, the game will ask if you played the first game and whether or not you chose to sacrifice Arcadia Bay, which will result in certain events being different based on which is chosen. It is pretty neat that you can choose whichever ending you want to be canon or not. That, along with a Life is Strange comic book adaptation by Titan Comics, that takes place after the Sacrifice Arcadia Bay ending, which from what I've heard is a pretty good series of comics that's worth reading if you enjoyed this game. Though I do like both endings, there's this feeling that none of your previous choices really matter by the end, as the final choice is always the same regardless. Like as if your only factor of making this final choice is mainly reflected on your thoughts on Chloe and all the other characters you've met along the way. But for what it's worth, the endings are still serviceable to the story being told. The only issue I have with the story that kind of blemishes it a bit is in regards to Chloe. While I enjoy her personality in the game, it doesn't really feel like she grows all that much in the story. Throughout the game, she kinda gets angry at Max when you either choose not to do some actions in the game, like stealing the disability fund to pay off Frank if you side with David during the table argument, or when you choose to answer Kate's phone call during episode 2. The only parts of the game where Chloe has any sort of character development is when she's disabled in an alternate timeline in episode 4, or if she kills Frank and his dog if you screw up the conversation to get his receipt book. It feels like they could have done a lot more with Chloe to make her a more developed character, at least compared to Max. Overall, Life is Strange is a pretty good episodic title that manages to stand out from other episodic games in the past, with its storyline, the visuals, interesting rewind mechanic, the result of the choices itself, and its strong characters with Max and Chloe. While I feel the game doesn't really have that much challenge, and that there could have been more impact to the choices made by the endgame, it still results in a decent game that managed to save Dontnod from going into bankruptcy, and result in Life is Strange becoming a new franchise for Dontnod to work on, and a new popular IP for Square Enix's lineup of games. Next time, we'll be delving into the prequel game, Life is Strange Before the Storm, and how the game turns out after a new developer takes over the project, while Dontnod works on their next project with Focus Home Interactive.